And we still have more work ahead here with our ram skull. Let's continue here with brush size 1 to make some smaller line work in the C sub mode. Gonna bring that down to here where we have that other line, and then complete it with a Z add line. Follow the same path as before. Bring that down here to where it connects. And then let's take a look at it here from the side. Let's also add a Z add here to that line. Follow it all the way here to the front where we have the nose. And then let's snap into that top perspective and let's add more details here to that part where right now it's still pretty empty. And also with brush size 1 on that, I'm gonna start with some C sub lines here, connected while being in the isolation mode here. And let's carry on with another additional Z add line. Let's take a look at it here from different angles again, and I'm gonna fill that a bit more there where it connects. And also here, let's add a bit more details there. I'm gonna have a Z subline. Just gonna go over this here once more with a Z subline. So now that I look at it again here, I'm not 100% happy with these lines that we have here in the side view if we look at it. And I think the best would be to roll back. Well, not really roll back, but we're just gonna go back here to our subdivision level 2 and pretty much erase these lines here with a smooth brush. So let's smooth them back out here, all the way here to the front. We can keep some part here of these lines that we have at the top. Don't need to redo those, but I don't like this here at the back either. I think that looks a little strange and we could make that look better. So let's just smooth it here. Then we jump over to subdivision level 3 and repeat that process. And I know it's annoying to do that, but on the other hand, this will show you how you can do these kinds of things to pretty much go back and start over while keeping some details in place. And that is an important thing to be able to do. So that would be one of these cases here. I'm gonna let these lines that we have there on the top remain as they are and just smooth it all out here on the side pretty much. And then we can reconnect it in a different way in just a moment. But for now, let's make sure we have all these details that are still showing here smoothed back out so that that doesn't look too noisy. And that is the way that we can always do that whenever we want to make changes on something that we already did. So now that we smoothed that out here, let's add a little bit of thickness to this. For that, I'm gonna go over here to subdivision level 2 once more. And then with our clay buildup brush, let's add some more volume here. Didn't quite like how that looked before. So I'm gonna use our clay buildup brush. And the reason why we do that here in subdivision level 2 is that otherwise on the subdivision level 4 it would look too sharp. So it's better to go back into a lower level on the subdivs and add the volume there and leave the higher subdivision levels for the smaller details. So once again, I'm gonna add a bit more volume here and fill that gap that we had there in combination here with our clay buildup and smoothing. I'm just gonna put it to subdivision level 4. Give it a quick smoothing here as well. But let's go back here to our subdivision level 2. And I want to use our H polish brush here to give this more contrast here around the eye sockets. I think that will be looking pretty good, where it was just too soft before. And with that, we can add some more contrast, which then later will look cool in combination here with our lines with a trim brush. And overall, this is looking pretty good. I'm just gonna smooth it a bit here and do a bit more work here at the eyes. Give it a bit more smoothing here so that it's not too bumpy once we get back here with our trim brush. Smooth it a bit there at the front as well. And now let's get back here to our trim brush, and we want to be back to subdivision level 4 for that. And I'm just going to toggle it here with our ghost mode and transparency. Let's just put the transparency off here for this line. I'm going to bring it down like that. And let's enable transparency here to have this other line going right under it. Bring it all the way down here. And that way we have something that looks more like a mouth, where before I thought these lines were a little bit too hard-edged looking. And now we have a bit more of a roundness here. So also here for that line, I like to have some curve there that kind of brings it together here at the bottom where the blade connects to it. And let's also use our trim brush here with a Z add. I'm gonna have it on draw size 1 for that. And I also want to connect it here. So you can see how the lines that we were doing before, we can really just reconnect them. If we didn't like something, we go back to a smaller subdivision level or a lower subdivision level and then erase it, and then later we can just redo it. And always good to zoom out. Pressing F will zoom out automatically. Pretty much frame the whole sword into the viewport canvas. But let's get back in here and add another C subline here around this small detail. And then let's go back here to our side and let's follow this line here along where we have this horn. And then here follow it also with the Z add stroke. Let's take a quick look here. And now I think this was a bit bad how we had it before. It was like this weird curve, and it's better to just have it looking something like this here, where it also follows the same path as the line next to it. So let's take a look here at this section. And I'm just gonna have brush size 1 here. Doesn't need to be such a big line. Let's also make this a bit more interesting here. We just Control Z that. I want to add another Z subline in here to give this really some contrast here, so that this looks a bit like a mouth. And let's connect this line here with a Z add. And let's have another Z add line here as well. And let's take a look. Let me just undo that. Sometimes it takes a few attempts to get it right. Gonna have another C subline here. And let's also give it a bit more details here at the front. Let me just zoom in here. Connect this here with the C sub. And then have some more lines coming out here. Let's take a look. And also here, like these small intersections here, have another C subline there. So as the next thing, what I want to do is select this piece that we have here coming out at the side, this one here. Press Alt to select it, and then we just hide it and go back here to this piece and hide it as well, so that we only have the blade left here together with that skull. And that way we can make a trim line. I'm going to use brush size 2. That goes all around that part where basically the blade is connecting with that. So I'm going to be in ghost mode for that. And that way it looks like it's actually connected there. And it's not just this simple object that is kind of sticking loosely in there. This gives the whole thing more credibility. And let's just be careful that it really follows along that line that we see here in the ghost view. And let's connect it here with that horn. And you can see now we have more depth there. And we can put back on here the visibility for these two objects that we were just hiding. So now it overall looks more in place there. Gonna go back here into our isolation view, and then with a brush size of 1, I want to add some more details here. These little knobs, for example, here. And let's continue by making a Z subline here, followed by Z add, to give this some interesting detail here as well. Kind of connect the whole thing here. Let's take a look here at that part. And what I want to do is have another line coming out here. Let's start with C sub, as always, pretty much. And I'm gonna bring it here down to the back of the head. And then let's snap here into our top view. Remember, we have this sphere there, so later we're gonna make some details on that sphere that look like it's connecting there with that skull head. And I wanna actually go back here to that sphere and move it a bit more in there, so that it doesn't look so out of place. And gonna go back to our skull and go back into the draw mode. And once again, sorry for the lag here. I am not sure if this is because my computer is too slow, but it's something that I didn't notice on my end. It's purely the recording, unfortunately. But as long as we do these lines here, those are running nicely. So I'm gonna have a C sub with a Z add. And that's really what matters, right? You wanna see the brush strokes, and this is fortunately not lagging. That would be terrible. But yeah, whenever I zoom out or rotate, it's just a bit choppy, the whole thing. So I want to add another Z add here. I'm gonna make another one of these details here where we use Z sub together with Z add to have like this little hole with one of these tiny details in it, Z sub and Z add. And also here I want to have one of these Z add details, and this here could be a bit more detailed as well. So I'm gonna have another line in there, and let's hover over it here and do also a bit more contrast here with a Z sub and some Z add. I'm gonna have 3 strokes there. And then it would also be time to detail out this ring that we have there in the center of the skull. So I'm gonna select it, make sure we have our X and Y symmetry on. And then let's go over here to our Z remeasure. And let's just use the default polygon count here of 5. So now let's divide it 3 times, or actually 4 times. That brings it to 1.2 million here. Let's go over here to our ghost mode. And then I want to have a brush size of 1. 2 is a bit too impactful here. Let's connect this here so that it looks like it's actually forged into that. I'm just going to go here into the isolation mode to connect it here at the inside pretty much of the ring. And let's see where we strike next. Here at the front. And same thing, I just want to make that a complete line that is connected. And now let's see here without our ghost mode. Gonna take it back here into the isolation view. And connect this here. Doesn't have to be always just one perfect arch. It's always nice to break it up a bit. And here on the top, I'm gonna have brush size of 2 to make one of these holes here, which is gonna be then a nice detail later on. And I want to connect that here. I'm back to brush size 1. Make this here an interesting looking detail, and then the inside of that we can fill it once again here with one of these details. Gonna have 3 brush strokes there on the inside. And let's see what else we can do here. Let's have another one of these lines here that pretty much follow the same path. I'm gonna have C sub and Z add and C sub here. And another Z sub here in the inside. And let's make this here look like it has some sort of a ripple effect here. Like some spheres in there. Just want to make sure this here is properly connected there at the back. And let's take a look at it here from the front. And add another one of these details here that we connect together here with that line that we already have. And let's add a bit more detail here as well. And now that we have these Z sub details pretty much in place here, it would also be good to add some Z add lines that support them. So let me just put the front view on here and start here at the front. And then connect it here. Let me just position that here better. And isolation mode is actually sometimes easier to see what we're up to. So I'm gonna have Z add with one of these C sub details there in the center, and then connect it here to the back. So let's take a look here at it from the bit of a top and side view, and I want to add one of these little dents there. And let's continue here with the side view snapped in to also add a C add line here along these lines that we were doing earlier. And always connect it here so that it's one continuous thing that we're looking at. And also we want to connect it here. And then let's snap into our top view. Just gonna press F and snap it so that we look at it here from the front. And then here on the top, I'm gonna actually have another bit of a C sub here. And now follow along here with a Z add. Let's take a look at it here. And overall, I think these are enough details here for that ring. So as the next thing, we could be working on these horns. So before we do that, let's take them, select them with Alt. And once again, we press Shift to bring it all the way down here on the sub toolbar. And we do the same thing here for the skull. Now we press Shift on one of these eyeball icons and only select the horn and the skull, which then makes it easier here to work on it. So I'm gonna Z remesh these horns. Remember to have symmetry on. And right now we're at 17,000. I'm gonna divide it, and I'm just gonna smooth it a bit here on subdivision level 2 before we add more subdivision levels. And we only need to do that on one of these horns, doesn't matter which one, because we have symmetry on. It's converting it to all of them. So I have 4 subdivision levels now, which brings it to around 1 million polys here, active points. And let's go over here to our transparency mode. And I want to have a brush size of 2. And I'm gonna start by having a line that kind of frames it here, where it enters that skull. And take that all the way around and connect it here on the other side. Let's continue to have another line on top of that. And for that, I want to not have a perfectly straight line, but have a bit of this zigzag pattern that goes down here, down and then up again. And then let's go over here to that side and do the same thing here at the back. Gonna go up here and then connect it. Next, I want to change our brush size to 1 and have 2 more of these lines here in the center of that. The first one, I'm just gonna have it here perfectly straight. Let's just go here to the other side and also connect that. Remember to use the Shift key to make a connecting line. And then we can do the same thing here, but also follow a bit that pattern that we have there on top. So a bit of this zigzag kind of a look here. And then here on that side, let's also do this. And bring it up a bit here and then connect it. And just a bit more here into that shape with a more Z sub. So next, let's take a look at it. Time to add some Z add lines. And I'm gonna start here with the first one that we made. Let me just zoom out a bit here, undo this and do that again here. And I'm gonna have one of these small little details there with a Z sub. And just carry on the line here on that side. And Shift key is our friend to make the connecting line here. I know it's kind of repetitive what I'm saying, but that's just the nature of things. We are using the same brush here throughout hours of video recording, and that is how we learn to basically do the same steps over and over, and that also guarantees that we have a consistent look here. So I'm going to continue to add more Z add lines here along the same path, which is gonna make for a nice normal map later on. Actually, let me just roll back here on that and make that a bit better. Like I said before, Ctrl Z is your friend. I use it a lot when I work with ZBrush. If something is not perfect, Ctrl Z and redo it. So I'm gonna carry on here with that kind of work. Connect these lines here all the way to the other side. And then let's take a look at it here. I want to add a bit more Z sub here to this element to make it point out a bit more. Give it a bit more contrast. And next, let's zoom in here, and the upper line that we have here could require some support line. So let me just position it here in the right way. And then right over it, I want to add another smaller Z subline. Small meaning brush size of 1 here in that case. And then here connect it while holding the Shift key. And then of course connect it here to the other side. Let me just get in a better angle here. Okay, there we go. So now we have quite a few details there at the bottom. Let's zoom in here at the top. And I want to make these double lines parallel to each other, which might save us some time. Don't have to rotate the camera twice. We're just gonna do it here at once. And let's take that over here to where it's supposed to connect. And of course also this one here. Bring that together. So now that we have that, I want to add another subtool here that we're going to extract out of these horns. And remember, because we have symmetry on, we only need to do it on one of the horns, and it gets then automatically applied to all 4 of them. So let me try to find a right angle here. And I want to make sure to be in that rectangular masking brush. So let's try here. And that doesn't look good. Ctrl Z. Let me try to find a better angle here. And that looks better. So now what we have to do is to extract that. we have our masking information, and we want to be over here at our subtool tab and extract. And I'm gonna put the thickness to 0.002 because I don't want it to be too thick. So now let's get rid of our mask here, draw a selection, and we go over to our geometry tab and Z-remesh these rings. That might take a moment. So now we have it here Z-remeshed, and we select our horns, isolate them, and we want to keep the mask on that we have there. And actually, let's go over here to our mask lasso tool, and let's mask out some more areas here on that horn. So let's zoom in here. Let's get a good angle on it, and let's just press Ctrl to make this mask selection here. Might require a bit of repositioning here with the camera angle. And just press Ctrl to add to that mask. And if you press Ctrl and space, you get this kind of a selection here that you can hold and navigate around. So in that case, we want to press Ctrl and Alt to deselect some parts of our mask, unmask some parts. And here I'm just going to draw here with Ctrl. Once again, let me try to find a better angle here and basically go around these details that we made there while pressing Ctrl. Oh, let me Ctrl Z that. Unmasked by accident. Okay, just press Ctrl here and also along here. And let's just make sure we get all these small details there as well. Let's take a look here. And overall, it's almost done. Just here a little bit more. And I see some more white stuff that is unmasked here on the back. So let me just also mask that. And now let's make a mask here also for that part. And I'm gonna use space again. And that worked instantly. So now we have this perfect mask here on these horns. And that means that once we are in our top view perspective here, so now let's bring up the brush menu, press ST for standard, and let's go over here to the Alpha tab, and we go over to import, and then load these two alpha textures here. I think you only need the PSD file, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think that's the one with the alpha information, so it would make sense actually. So now we have this alpha texture here, and what we want to do is go over to our stroke tab here and change this lazy step sensitivity to 1.2. So let's see how it behaves now. I'm going to increase our C intensity here to a 32, and I'm going to take this into isolation mode here, these horns, and I'm going to change our draw size to a 7. So now let's start by dragging these details onto the horn. And I'm already starting a little bit where we have the masked area so that the affected region is basically drawing then into it. So let's carry on here. Gotta rotate around. And once again, thanks to symmetry, we only have to do it once. And it gets automatically done on all the other ones. So now we have these nice scales here on the horns. Just gonna add a little bit more there at the bottom. And that just makes for an interesting contrast here to the otherwise very hard surface looking details that we have. Let's take a look at it here. Also from the front, this is a nice angle here. And from the back, we have the snake hat, where later we can also add some scales on top to complement that. Let's go back here to these rings. And I'm just gonna go back here to our trim brush. Take that into isolation mode. And remember, we were Z-remeshing it earlier. So now all we have to do is smooth it out a bit where it looks so chiseled. And once again, the good thing is we only have to do that on one of the sides or one of the rings. So let's take a look at it here once we're out of the isolation mode. And now let's go over here to our geometry tab and let's divide it. So I'm gonna have it divided here only for 3 divisions and delete the higher one. That brings us to 645,000 points, which should be enough. So now let's press Shift again shortly and then let go in order to rotate like this here. We want to get a good angle here on one of these rings, and that is easier done when we are in the isolation mode here. And let me just do it once more. So now we have this pretty horizontal here, and I'm gonna choose our mask rect tool and bring the selection here over that. Let me just undo this and do it once more. So pressing Control will make a nice selection here. I'm just gonna soften it, like press Control and press 5 times into the masked region. Let's go down to that deformation tab and where it says inflate. And you don't want to have it looking like that. So I'm going to undo that. And basically, we want to have a very subtle effect. But let me just undo this and revert the mask. Okay, this is better. But let me undo it once more and soften the mask more. Let's press 3 times to soften it into the selection. And then let's just have like a subtle inflation here. Would that be the right word? Inflation? I'm not sure, but I think you know what I mean. So now we have this a little beveled here, essentially. And that just adds more detail to these things. I want to go back here to these horns. And I'm thinking it looks a little bit too crowded here. I want to get rid of this line there. So I'm gonna go back here to our second subdivision level. And then with a smaller brush size here of around 2, just gonna erase this. Remember, we always have to start that on a lower subdivision level. Erase it there first, and then we go to the next one, in that case subdivision level 3. Just gonna make the brush even smaller here so we don't accidentally delete details that we don't want to delete. You just undo that. I think I just did that, so it's better to have a brush size of 1 here on that area to be more precise. And now we go over to our last subdivision level. Just gonna increase the brush size here for that case. And just get rid of the remaining small details that we have here. It must not be entirely perfect. I mean, you might still see a little bit of that line, but it's not really a big deal. In the contrary, it might actually be a cool little small detail that looks like there's a bit of an extra edge, very subtle. So next, let's just zoom in here at the tip of these horns. And with the Z sub, I'm just gonna add a little bit where we have these bumps. And as a next thing, I want to work here on these spheres. So let's make sure to have symmetry on X and Y. And then I'm gonna Z remesh it. Take it into isolation mode here. And divide it. And also smooth it a bit. Remember, when we do it from the front, that means we also apply it to the bottom. I'm gonna divide it 4 times. That brings us to 1.2 million polys. And let's just put the ghost mode down and zoom in here with our trim brush set to 1. So I'm gonna follow these lines that we already have there pretty much. And I'm gonna do it twice to have a little bit more thickness there with a C sub. And it connects these lines that we already have there on the ram head. So now I'm gonna make one of these details here with a brush size of 2, but now back to 1 and basically frame it. And then I like to do these details here on the inside. Always adds for a nice, interesting detail. And also I want to follow this here along with a Z add, Z sub, and a Z add. So as the next piece, let's focus here on this element here in the back. But first, let's select this center element that we have here. So I want to use our rectangular masking tool and make a selection here on the sides and then invert it. Press Ctrl into the viewport to invert it. Let's just take it into isolation mode to make that more obvious. And now I'm going to go over here to our scale tool, scale it, and then let's draw a selection to Dynamesh it. Go back here to our draw tool and just smooth out these details that we have here, or these jagged lines pretty much. And now we can Z remesh it. So let's go back here to our move tool. I'm just gonna drag it down a bit here, or a bit more to the center, and also use the scale here to make it a little bit shorter. So now let's go back here to this piece, and I'm gonna use Z remesher here. Leave it on the first iteration for now and just smooth out a bit here these edges, or just in general where things look otherwise a little bit bumpy. Divide it once more. So now we have 2 subdivision levels, and just have a smaller brush here. Also do a bit more smoothing, especially here in the at this part. Looks a little bumpy. So just let's use Shift key to smooth that. And then let's divide it once more here. So now that brings us to 300, but let's divide it even a 4th time. 1.2 million polys should be good. And I'm gonna snap over here to our side view, and I wanna use our move brush and just bring it back to the low subdivision level for the moment, while using a bigger sized move brush here at size of 13 to rescale that a bit. Make this whole silhouette a bit more interesting here on that piece, so it's not entirely flat. So let's just make that a little bit more curvy here. And let me get out of the ghost mode to see what we're dealing with here. I just want to bring that up a bit so that this element that we have there in the center is looking kind of in place there, and it's not facing this other element with a curve. So it's more straight, basically, if you look at it from the side. So now let's just go back here and smooth that out again. And I'm just gonna have the clay build up. And I want to add a little bit here around this sphere that we have there. And now I'm just gonna smooth it back out, which also takes away a bit again. It's almost like a C-sub operation, just so that this sphere looks a little bit more connected there. I'm gonna select this piece that we have there in the center, and then go over here to our side perspective as well and use our move tool to scale it a bit here on that vertical axis pretty much. And also add a bit more here to the thickness, scale it out a bit to the sides. Z-remesh it once more because we did a few changes on it, so the mesh is perfectly topologized to this new size. And then I'm gonna use our trim brush here. Once again, make sure symmetry is turned on X and Y. And then I'm just gonna start making some details here with a C-sub. Follow this down here, even though that's where it's sticking into the geometry, intersecting, but at least it looks like a complete line then. That's not just magically appearing out of nowhere. And I'm going to continue here with more C-sub. Bring that all the way here to the front and also connect it on the way down here. And then have one of these details here put in the center. And keep in mind that wherever we do something here in the center, the C-sub and C-add is basically double the strength. So now I'm just gonna have the usual Z-add and C-sub and C-add to complement these lines that we did. And also let's take a look at it here from different angles. Overall, I think this is a good detail here and is enough for now. Maybe we add more later, but I think it's pretty detailed looking. So as a next thing, let's go back here to this piece in the background, the big one. And I actually want to have it at lowest subdivision level here and use some H polish brush on it to give it a bit more contrast here, especially where we have these edges. It doesn't need to be much, but especially where we have these borders, like here, let's have it a bit in the center and also here on the side, a bit more here. And you can see how the H polish brush is really useful to make it a bit more hard edged looking, even though we are still in a very low subdivision level. Just gonna smooth that there a little bit there where we had that sphere. And next, let's get out of the isolation mode. And I want to snap into it here from the top view. Select our trim brush and leave it on a draw size of 7. So basically rather large. And while we are in the ghost mode, I want to have some sort of a mold here to frame this. And I'm just gonna apply it on the lowest subdivision level here onto our mesh. And then smooth that out a bit here in the isolation mode. Let's go back here to our subdivision level. Oh, I don't need to divide it. I already divided it. So I'm on the first subdivision level. Let's just put it back to 4. And let's leave the isolation mode. And what I want to do is hide these horns because otherwise they are in the way. So I'm just going to go down here a bit on the view, select these horns. By the way, we can unmask it. I'm just going to have a rectangular to get rid of that mask, which we don't need anymore. Hide it and then also hide this thing and just select back that piece, and now everything has a clear view here on the area that we want to be working on. So I'm just gonna have this here set to brush size of 2. And then I want to use our trim brush to follow along here this sphere. Have a Z add coming out of this piece. Connect it with a Z sub around it. And then have another pair of Z subs coming around here to that point where I'm gonna have another Z add followed by Z sub. So now we kind of frame this element that we have there in the center, make it look more connected, and let's have a line of Z add here in the inner part of that, as well as here. Make sure it's properly connected there on the top. And now let's carry on with more Z sublines here. And this time I'm gonna bring it down here. Now let's make another Z subline here coming out of this one, but let's make it really fast. Same here. I'm just gonna undo that. The benefit of making this in a swift and fast movement is that it looks just clean, you know. We don't have to follow the line carefully and are more likely to make some movements that we don't want. So sometimes it's good to just have this rapid movement. So now I'm just going to connect that here on the top as well. Gonna go into isolation mode here and have more of our Z sub lines here. Make that all look connected, or at least so that this was forged as one piece with different divisions in it. And I'm gonna carry on here with more Z sub. This time I'm gonna take my time, bring it down here. Let's just scroll around here. I actually want to undo that. It's better to have this angle here on it, so that once we get to that point here, we have a better angle on making that line. So next, let's have some focus here on the side view of it. And I'm just gonna follow that here a bit more with the Z sub. But I'm not gonna complete it, because what I wanna do is have a brush size of 3 and then add one of these bigger Z sub lines there in the center. Just gonna put it back to brush size of 2 and then add one of these elements here. I'm gonna have 3 strokes for it so that it really comes out. And let's snap back into our top perspective here. And I want to have a brush size of 1 to make some smaller detail work now along these lines that we already did. So I'm just gonna have actually another Z subline here on that. Let's get into a different perspective here, a bit more from the side, and also follow it along here. And let's also have a Z sub following these details that we have here. Doesn't always have to be Z add. It can also be just Z sub with like a bigger and a smaller line, makes for nice details. So I'm just gonna bring it around these lines that we already did. And then also down here, Z sub, Z add, and Z sub, and bring it together here.